buildinggreenwichct.com.
Hello, everybody. I'm Scott Elwell, here with my co-host, Lindsay Potter.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Building Greenwich.
The All Things Greenwich podcast.
The All Things Greenwich podcast.
And today we have Bob Arnold, the CEO of Family Centers in Greenwich. And I guess we'll just dive right in and talk about you and talk about what's going on.
Yes, welcome, Bob. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for the Family Centers?
Sure, yes. Well, as you just said, Scott, I'm CEO at Family Centers, and I have been CEO at Family Centers since, hang on to your seat, 1982.
Ooh, Bob.
Congratulations.
Yeah, wow.
You just had an anniversary 2 years ago.
I suppose I did. Yeah. It's been a very fruitful, exciting, and long journey for me at Family Centers, and it's an organization that has just grown exponentially since that time, and you would expect it would grow a lot, or otherwise it wouldn't really even be around still. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, but we do have a big benefit fundraiser coming up on Saturday evening.
Okay, yeah, what are the stats on that?
So let me just say that we've been doing large benefits now. This is it's the 30th anniversary. We started with our big benefits in 1994 in Greenwich with the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers Circus event that we held behind the high school and had 750 people for dinner to watch a three-ring circus.
Cool.
Where was that?
Right behind Greenwich High School. On the fields.
That's amazing.
Which you could never do today because after we did it the first time, they redid the fields and said, never again can you have a circus on
I was
it.
going to say, I was at Greenwich High School in 94, and those fields were pits of dust, and now they are very nice turf fields, so I get it why they don't want you doing those events anymore.
Well, we found out that it wasn't good for the field to have elephants trouncing around on them.
Fair enough.
Anyway, that was the beginning of our large events, and we do one large event every year to help support our services and programs, and I'll tell you why we need to do that also in a bit. So this year we have a really exciting themed event at a private home on North Street, and the theme is Through the Looking Glass, so it's an Alice in Wonderland theme. Going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully raise a ton of money for Family Centers programs.
That's fantastic. Is it a dressed-up event? I mean, is everyone going in?
Yeah, so some people at our events, because we mostly have themed events, so some people will get into the spirit of the theme and, dress even in costume, and others will just dress in cocktail attire and come and enjoy the event.
And yourself?
I'm not going to tell you that.
Fair enough.
Cheshire Cat.
You'll have to stop by, Scott, and check it out.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, how many people are expected to attend on Saturday?
I think we have 350 guests.
Oh, that's great.
That's a big event.
That's great. So can we go back a little bit? Now, Family Centers, I know, has been around, we just said it offline, but longer than I think the three of us combined have been alive, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, 1891?
So 1891, yes. And I guess at this point in time, I'm the historian on Family Center, so I'll give you just the quick 50-second version.
Yeah, we're here.
1891, Stanford Welfare Bureau in the city of Stanford forms with a group of volunteers, and they begin to work with immigrant populations, surprise, and there weren't a lot of social services or supportive work going on, so this group of volunteers decided that they would step in and help those people who were newer to the community or those people who were struggling. A few years later in Greenwich, 1895, the Greenwich Aid Society began. Almost identical group of volunteers who would raise their own children and now were concerned about families living in the community who, again, primarily were immigrants. Instead of from, the South America and Central America area, these immigrants were almost all from Europe and settled in Greenwich and settled in the Stanford area. So these organizations did a lot to help those families who were struggling. There wasn't anything like unemployment then. If these families came here without a lot of supports. They didn't have family members, so if one parent became ill, it became a real challenge for the other parent to both work and take care of children. So they set up programs to help with the children and to provide supports. That went on for 100 years side by side, and in 1995, we merged those two operations, the Stamford side and the Greenwich side, to form family centers.
So they were running as separate institutions?
They were running as two separate neighbor institutions, both with lots of programs, but both serving the separate communities.
Okay.
And so now does Family Centers serve both communities?
So Family Centers geography is basically Stamford, Greenwich, Darien, and New Canaan. But of course, we get a lot of families from Westchester and Norwalk and some of the areas to the east as well, just because of the kinds of programmings that we offer.
How far do people come from?
Well, so for our bereavement program, which is the Den for Grieving Kids, and it's a program that's there for children who've lost a parent or a loved one, families come from, I would say, as far as Fairfield Trumbull area, and parts of Westchester that are probably 40 minutes from here. Because it's somewhat of a unique program. There are other bereavement programs around, but this one really focuses on helping the child resolve grief before it becomes a serious issue in their life.
Yeah.
And it takes really months of companioning the child, working with, depending on the age, maybe some talk groups, but a lot of play groups as well.
And is this just for the death of a parent, or could it be the death of anyone that's close to them, a sibling and a relative that's very close?
Could be the death of a sibling, could be the death of a grandparent who lives with them that they have a particularly close relationship with. Yeah. So it's really just somebody who's very impactful in the child's life.
That's so nice that you have those services. I mean, I think all of us have gone through that type of trauma. And
so I'll tell you how that started, because again, when you're learning about Greenwich, in the early 1990s, it was the Junior League of Greenwich that did a study on what's happening for children who've lost parents and what's bereavement looking like. And the only real bereavement that was available at the time was mostly either through a therapy, and a lot of these kids don't really need psychotherapy, or through faith-based operations. Churches, you could go in and sometimes meet with a pastor or a clergyman, and they would counsel the family, but it wasn't so focused on the young child or even a teenager. And so they did a pretty extensive piece of research, went out to a place called the Dougie Center in Portland, Oregon, found this model, brought it back to Greenwich. The Junior League started the program, ran it themselves for 3 years, and then turned it over to family centers.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
My mom was always in the Junior League growing up. I know so many women that were, but
thank her for the great work, because I think they've done some seminal stuff. And
I just got off the phone. It's actually really nice to know that the Junior League did something like that and went to such lengths to do their research and go out to a place across the country where something was really working and bring it here.
Yeah, find out what's worked for other people.
Right.
And, it sounds like you've taken a lot of programs and made them a little more formal with a little bit more expertise. And
We have. I'll mention one last thing on the Junior League, because it's something you may want to look at in the future. They also got the Kids in Crisis Center here in Greenwich started, which is another...
Oh, they started that?
They did.
I didn't know that they started
I did not know that.
Yeah, right out of the Junior League.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Well, another amazing organization we'll have someone here to talk about.
Yeah.
So, Bob, can you tell us a little bit about the services that Family Center provides? I mean, as if we know nothing about it.
Well, we were talking earlier. But we know that you have 1,000 different programs, but how do you start the conversation on an elevator, so to speak? I mean, really quickly, high level, and then dive deeper.
Sure. I try to stay off of elevators because of that. So I think I start the conversation in describing family centers as an umbrella organization as opposed to just sort of a silo of something really specialized. Okay. So under our umbrella, we have a lot of specialized things, and we try to be, aspire to be, and I believe are, a very holistic organization. So that when someone, anyone at any age, comes to us looking for help with a particular problem, it could be a counseling need, it could be a health need, it could be a family situation, it could be that the person's struggling to develop a career and needs work, help, assistance. It could be language issues, a whole wide variety.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, we have lots of portals that people can enter from. And once they do enter, we try to do a very comprehensive assessment. So we don't just tackle the one issue that they brought to the door, which is probably a very important issue and may in their life at this moment in time be their priority. But of course, we all know we have multiple needs. And so it's good to understand the whole person and what the whole person and the system that they operate in, their family, what that family is all about and what the family needs to really become fully successful, to realize the family's potential and the individual potential within the family. So we started out really with just a few programs, early education, counseling and mental health. And then over the years, we just, because of what we saw coming in the door,
Right.
It's all about listening when you meet people.
Yes, it is.
It's not about what you have to give. It's about what they need. So you need to listen carefully about what people need. Sometimes we could meet their need internally, and still today, sometimes we can't, and we connect with partners who will help with those other elements of things that people need in their lives. But over the years, we've developed lots of different programs to meet those needs where there weren't programs for those needs. And sometimes we've acquired programs that would meet those needs. The Den is one of those examples.
Okay.
So not only has this organization grown organically by adding programs that we see there's a need for, but we've also done a number of mergers with other not-for-profit organizations. There are a lot of not-for-profits that start up around an issue.
Right.
And that issue may be a very important issue, but it might be that that's an issue that could be handled in a bigger umbrella organization. Doesn't have to be a standalone business.
Right.
So we have had, over the course of my time, 10 mergers and acquisitions
Wow.
of other organizations. And so, for instance, there was a program in town that was doing crisis counseling called the Hotline.
Mm-hmm.
This was in Greenwich, maybe when you were in high school, the Hotline was around. It was in the mid-'90s that the Hotline came to family centers and said, we're struggling to make it on our own, but our services are important. And we looked at that and we took in the Hotline. The Hotline evolved and today is called Friendly Connections,
I like that.
which is connections that we make by, it focused mostly on elderly people or homebound people, home visits, and sometimes telephone support programs.
Well, and with that merger, I assume you can take a lot of the administrative and, you have an economy of scale that can help out smaller groups, right?
So, Scott, that's exactly what happens. So I'm going to give a great example. One of the programs that merged into family centers was the Center for Hope in Darien.
Oh, yeah.
So the Center for Hope was operating as a freestanding organization doing critical illness counseling and grief work. So when they were on their own, they were a little over $1 million operation because they had an executive director and they had a chief finance person and they had all kinds of supports and a lot of overhead that got laid on those programs. And there were only a couple of programs. When they came into family centers, we were able to absorb the whole operation, keep that level of service going on, and bring the cost down from $1 million a year to about $350,000, $400,000 a year.
Wow.
Now, this was in 2005, so those dollars would be more today. But yes, so we shaved off 60% of the costs.
Wow.
So then the donors' dollars going in are better used.
So then the donors' dollars could be directed toward more direct services and less overhead, less fundraising, less all of that stuff.
Actually really helping the people that need it.
Exactly. So that's what's come out of almost all of these mergers. Greater efficiency and a much better cost-effective delivery system to get a donor's dollars right out to some client population.
Right. Now, how does a family or an individual apply to work with family centers? How do they know to come to you?
Yeah, most of it's through referrals.
Okay.
I mean, we have programs where people are embedded in public housing in Stamford and Greenwich. They're running into people, dealing with people every day, doing resident service work. They see when someone needs, well, they're family centers themselves, but they also see when someone needs other programs of ours. We have 10 school-based health centers. So we're right in public schools, mostly in Stamford and Greenwich High School. And at those school-based health centers, in most of them we provide primary care, so you go in for health care, you could get some dental care, and you can get a lot of mental health care. In those programs also, we find other needs that are in those families, and they get referred to other programs of ours. Another one of our programs is literacy.
Okay.
And family centers took on literacy volunteers of Stamford Greenwich, merged into us. And so a lot of the families that we work with today, and I think you'll hear this in this region, are new immigrants. They're coming from other countries in search of the American dream, to make life better for their children. And they get here, and there are jobs, but it's not easy because it's hard to find housing. It's hard to navigate all of the complicated systems. And one of the biggest barriers they face all the time is the language barrier.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. So even if a child's in our Head Start program and is in our early ed program, maybe the parent has very poor English skills. So we try to pull every parent and every client we have into literacy, because we know that their best shot of being successful and advancing themselves and their family is to acquire strong language skills.
I've got sort of a two-part question here. You have, just now, within 30 seconds, you touched upon dental to literacy. So you've got a pretty...
That's a big umbrella, Bob.
Pretty big umbrella. I guess sort of two parts. A, what are you looking to grab in the future? And then B, are you seeing donors that would like their money going to specific programs or the whole general operation? How does that work in adding programs and also allocation of resources?
Okay, that's a really big question.
You went from dental to literacy, so
I did.
You opened up the giant umbrella.
Exactly.
I did. And so, interestingly enough, dental and primary care and school-based health care is, again, one of those organizations that we acquired that merged into family centers.
Okay.
And they fit well on our platform, as we also acquired the literacy program. Donors, and with those programs, we acquired some donors as well. But donors have an opportunity when they work with us, and we work with a lot of foundations, to choose a specific program or a category of programs, like the health and wellness programs or the social service programs. They can choose anything that they would like to support. And of course, we love donors who come in and say, we believe in everything you do. We'll give you a general gift. You know how to use it. You'll know how to spend it best. That's terrific when that happens. But one of the things that you are getting at when you ask us about dental to literacy is we operate in several different industries, which makes our job a little more complex.
Yeah.
We aren't just in one industry. So we're basically in the early education field. So we do a lot of early education, preschool, parenting. That's a separate industry. We're in the health industry. And we're also in the social services industry. So we've got a lot of wraparound social service type outreach programs that help people to navigate better, acquire skills that they need, whether it's vocational. It's quite a wide variety of things. And so how do they all string together? Because underneath all of that, there's sort of a deep connective tissue that's there. And it sounds like when you say it, there's a big leap from dental to literacy. But if you're working with families who come here who have language issues and they come from a Central American country where they virtually didn't have dental care. So now we're seeing kids who arrive at 8 and 12 years old with horrible dental needs. That has to be addressed.
No, that's fantastic. That you're doing that.
So, I mean, it's not like we just pluck things out of the air and say, oh, well, we ought to do some of this or that. There are actually things we decide not to do.
Well, and that's also where I was, wanted to lead into, what directions you're following and where you're going. I mean, do a lot of the programs come up because you had an opportunity to acquire an organization that could be helped, or you've got a donor that's really interested, or there is a need that you don't think is served?
So your question's interesting because of the way you asked it. We don't go and acquire organizations that need to be acquired. The only reason we would do it is if we look at the population that we're already serving and we say, if we had that program here, it would really elevate the services and the impact we could have on our current population. So we're not a rescue group for organizations that are not doing well. We will absorb them if they have valuable programs, and maybe they're not going to survive if we don't.
Right.
They have valuable programs. So when we took on literacy volunteers was one that was in one of the weakest positions of any organization that we took on. And it looked like they were going to go under if we didn't take them in. And we looked at the situation, we said, you know what? If we don't take literacy volunteers in, because our programs were actually their biggest customers, we're going to have to reinvent this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because we have to have it for our client population. So we took them in and it made sense.
Well, and going back to the efficiency piece.
Totally.
It's making it more efficient for everyone in your organization. And I will say that you have this piece of paper in front of you that I keep staring over your shoulder at, but it is a colorful wheel, and I'll show it to the camera.
He didn't give you one.
I didn't get one yet, but I'm hoping
That's
to get
yours.
one.
Keep
Thank
it.
you, Bob. But when I look at this, there are truly so many different facets of what you do as an organization, and it says here in the corner 300 plus professionals and 500 plus volunteers. Can you tell us a little bit about the people that you have working with you in your immediate group at family centers, and then how people can get involved? Again, why we do this podcast is to share with our community the things that are happening that people like you are managing, and how people can get involved and support.
Absolutely. So because we do a very wide variety of things, there are some areas where we could use volunteers much more than other areas. So take early education. It's very regulated. We're an accredited early childhood provider, so we have to have teachers with special credentials, etc. How can volunteers help there? We have a lot of teenagers from the local high schools who come in and will help out in classrooms, play sports with the kids, teach the kids things, read to them out on the playground, play with them. And our early ed students just love having teenagers there with them. Now, we can't have an 8 or 10-year-old come in and work with 4 and 5-year-olds,
Right.
but teenagers who are ready to get engaged in some volunteer activity are really helpful. We have some programs that run around volunteers. I mean, they are there because of volunteers. The Den with Grieving Kids uses not a complete delivery system with volunteers, but probably 80% of it's delivered through volunteers. People who come and get trained by our team to work in groups with kids, whether on the nights of service at our facility or in the schools during the day where we run bereavement groups. So we use a lot of volunteers in the den. Literacy is volunteers. Literacy volunteers, we get people who come in and who will work with with some teaching professionals and get guidance, but will work with the literacy groups themselves. And it's amazing because you don't have to speak the language of the people that you're working with in literacy volunteers.
Right.
You don't even have to be a multilingual person, but you can still come in, and because of the materials and the methodology we have, you could teach someone to speak great English.
Yeah.
So those programs, and there are many ways to volunteer. I mean, we have other tutoring programs where we use volunteers, Family First in Education. We have a co-educators program to help parents become their child's best first educator. We also have special events for families that are not privileged when it comes to cultural access. So we'll do special things with them, take them to museums, bowling alleys, sporting events, and that volunteers can be very helpful in those kinds of programs.
Now, to get specific, right now, top of mind, what's an area of need that you don't think is getting enough attention?
Well, I'll tell you an area that is extremely challenging right now, and that's reaching everybody who needs mental health services.
Okay.
You may know, because of all of the press that it's gotten, that we have a mental health crisis in the country, and it stems from a lot of different things. For a lot of the youth who are having that crisis, the genesis of it is the COVID period, where they had isolation, they became overly dependent on social media, they lost the beginnings of friendships, they lost touch with the personal touch in their lives, and they were home, sort of locked up for a while, and tensions with parents rose. Everybody was on edge during that period. And there have been long legs from the COVID experience. So that led to this mental health crisis. The other thing I would say about the mental health needs is that we have so many people, I said this earlier, I'll repeat it, who've come here from other places, from South America, Central America, and they've had harrowing journeys to get here, some of them. There's an awful lot of trauma embedded in both the adults who came and the children who came, and that plays itself out over time. We're trying in our work to get more people to be able to assess these kids, these families, right off the bat, so we could get out a little bit more in front of it and not wait until symptoms show up in a classroom or come out behaviorally, that sort of thing. We just, this past year, started a new program for screening youth in the area. And it's a community health worker who gets out and goes to different places where there are a lot of youth congregated and can screen them for post-trauma, for anxiety, whatever they're facing, and get them to the place they need to go, whether it's one of our school-based clinics or a child guidance center or some sort of supportive place. So I think mental health is a really big issue. And because we recognize that, and I'll tell you something else that's happening with us right now, which is that we're in the process of doing a very big partnership with Greenwich Hospital, Yale New Haven Health. And we are planning to take over 2 clinics that Greenwich Hospital currently runs in Greenwich, an adult primary care clinic and a pediatric clinic. And those clinics are for families that are uninsured or underinsured. Lots of Medicaid families.
I'm sure there are a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, families in that situation.
Yeah. So we're going to partner. We're going to take over the clinics. We're going to run them, and we are going to put mental health right into those primary care clinics for pediatrics and for adults. And so it'll be right there available, because often the primary care person, when they're doing an evaluation, sees and hears a mental health issue, but they don't always have an immediate solution for it. So if you create the immediate solution, you become more comprehensive in providing that
and
service.
keep it top of mind and have the connection a little easier for them to make, because they're already busy enough.
That's right. So we're very excited about that. That should be, we expect that to be happening this summer.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
At Greenwich Hospital. Right?
So we're going to be doing it at 75 Holly Hill,
Okay.
which is where the two clinics have recently been relocated. And we'll continue to work with the Yale School of Medicine and have residents in our clinic. So it's a great opportunity to partner with them on the medical side. And we'll have our own medical team running the clinic and our own psychiatric component.
So that goes back to your 300 plus professionals. How maybe a big umbrella question, but how many full-time professionals do you have in each one of these buckets?
So I would say that maybe close to 200 are full-time and 100 are,
Wow,
part-time.
that's big.
Yeah. And the organization is basically split. We have we're integrated like a helix, two areas wrapping around each other. But we have our healthcare area and we have our education and human service area. And each one has a chief who's in charge of those two areas. They work closely together because there's a lot of crosswalks between the healthcare and the social service area.
Now, on the funding side,
Yeah.
and you said you work with a lot of nonprofits and charities and donors. I mean, how is that broken up? I mean, how is all this paid for?
Yeah, I think I don't have the dollars down to
I mean, more generally speaking.
So it's a three-legged stool. Just think of it as a three-legged stool. One leg is governmental grants. We get federal grants to run our federally qualified health center and Head Start and some other programs. We get some state grants and some local grants. So that leg is government funding. That's one leg. Another leg is fees that we get, tuitions, medical fees, insurance reimbursement, and that's the second leg of the stool. All kinds of service fees. Although we have a lot of programs that have no fee at all. In fact, most of them don't. And then the third leg to the stool is the philanthropic leg. Mm-hmm. And that's made up of foundation grants that we receive, individual donors giving an annual donor drive, and several events that we run during the year, including our big one on Saturday evening. We also run generally a Titan speaker event where we get some very well-known speaker and use that as a fundraiser. And our Center for Hope has a luncheon every year. And we have a speaker at the Center for Hope luncheon as well.
Who have been some of your more exciting speakers?
Well, our last speaker at the Center for Hope lunch was Luke Russert, Tim Russert's son, who that was a year ago, and he had just written a book on losing his father, looking for himself and looking for his father. He went on a worldwide trip, and he talked about his grief journey. And of course, our Center for Hope is a lot about grief and healing. And so, and we've had Maria Shriver as one of our speakers,
awesome.
Center for Hope. Yeah. Mariel Hemingway. I mean, we've had people who've written books, and we almost had Maria Shriver's daughter was scheduled to be at our luncheon in, 2021 maybe? 2020? The day that COVID really sort of shut everything down. Catherine Schwarzenegger Pratt was our speaker, and I talked to her at 7 o'clock in the morning and said, Catherine, because of what happened last night, the president was on television, he shut the whole country down. we're not going to be able to go. We thought we were going to be able to go ahead with the luncheon, and she was in New York City coming in the morning, and she said, "That's okay. I was only hanging out in New York until I got to you guys and did your lunch." And she said, "I'm going to catch the next plane back to California because things were getting really kind of crazy with COVID."
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, we've had some wonderful speakers, great people who give their time. We've never paid a speaker. They do it from the heart.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'm wondering, back to mental health, because as you said, it is an epidemic, and I love that you're doing the work that you're doing in this space. If there are people that are looking for mental health services locally, can they just reach out? You know, there's so much shame that's tied up in admitting that you need help mentally, emotionally. There's fear, there's shame, as you know. Is there a way for people to reach out to family centers? You know, do they use that hotline that we were talking about earlier? Is there a number to call? Like, what would be the best way?
Yeah. So we're easy to find on the internet. It's familycenters.org. And we our main number is 203-869-4848. You could call that number and you could easily connect with one of our mental health services, our healthcare services.
An 869 number.
An 869 number.
The only number, you know, when we were growing up, we had to memorize everyone's phone number. That's how you got in touch with people. So you memorize. Now you don't need to memorize anything.
Yeah.
But I still have every phone number, and most of them were 869.
That's right.
Of my friends.
661 was.
Yeah, 869, 661, 637.
And before it was 869, it was Townsend 9.
Townsend.
Dial 24. And you
They used to. I'm showing you my age. They used to have a word in front of the, for the first two numbers. It was Townsend, and yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, well, that's great to know. Thank you that people can just call the number and talk to a human and get the help that they need.
And because you see the number of lives we touch annually, 24,000 this past year, and that includes family members who have a family member or a whole family in our program or family members in our program. You can imagine that we get a lot of people coming and calling us through word of mouth.
Right.
Someone used one of our services and they went through a divorce. They had a contentious situation. It impacted the family. They have now a friend going through divorce. They say, look, call so-and-so. Could be an individual person. I might say, I worked with Lindsay. Call Lindsay.
Right.
Right?
Right. I just love how you also, it's such a holistic, the picture that you paint of how you and family centers are supporting everyone in our community, going back to where we started when you said it was the holistic, like lack of words, but full picture, holistic journey, because it really is. You have to take into account everything that's going on in a person's life, not just this one targeted thing like someone has passed and you're grieving. There are so many other elements that factor into where you are and where you are on your healing journey and how can we help you get there, right?
If you were a mental health counselor, therapist, and you were to sit down with somebody and do an initial intake, we're meeting for the first time, you're telling me about the problem you're coming in to see me about. I could tell you that in that first intake, 45 minutes, an hour, I'm going to have at least 5 issues other than the one you mentioned you were coming in for, that as you started talking, you laid out those other issues, because that's how it is. People have a lot of issues. Now, can you tackle all issues at once? No, of course you're going to prioritize. But in our school-based clinics, a student will come in often for a physical issue and talk to the nurse practitioner, and in the process of talking to the nurse practitioner, just spelled out something that's going on of great concern on the mental health side.
Right.
And flip that over, happens all the time with the mental health clinician. And people let things slip out that they don't seem to think are really big issues, but at the moment, but are really big issues. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is listening. if you take the time to listen to what people are saying, you're going to hear a lot.
Well, and one group you talked about earlier that I forget about because they don't speak up as much. You'll see why. Were the little kids that were, I think, 3 to 5 years old going into COVID that suddenly had no socialization. They're at their house. While they've been alive for 3 to 5 years, they've only had 2 or 3 years of conscious life or whatever, and suddenly half their life is at home. And I know that, do you search out to make sure to double check? Because, having daughters myself, a lot of times they don't speak up and they don't tell you that there's anything wrong, but you can sort of tell.
Well, they also can't tell you what they missed developmentally.
Right.
Because they don't know, because they didn't hit it yet, right?
So how do you find out if somebody's going through something at that age?
So I think one of the things that, you've got a dual question, but I think one of the things we found...
Sorry about all my...
That's right. One of the things we found through COVID with the 3 to 5 year olds is that, so in that day in March when we had to close everything down, we had to close our preschools down because no one could, all schools closed, preschools closed, everything closed. Literally within a couple of weeks, our teachers were doing virtual visits with their students. So we were engaging the parents to make sure that the child went online and could meet with and see their teacher, and the teachers also did drive-by visits to the children's homes, and that lasted.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that really is fantastic.
Yeah. So the
Wave
parent,
outside. There's an
the
actual
parent came
human.
out to the curb,
That's awesome.
and the teacher opened the window, and they had a conversation, and the teacher got to ask Sally how she was doing and what she's doing, and gave her things to work on, some materials, and just little things put together so that there was that connection. And that only went on for us until July 1. And then at the beginning of that July, we actually reopened.
Yeah.
Now, we were under, all kinds of restrictions. Kids had to they slept on their cots further apart. They wore masks. That was no fun with 3 and 4 year olds.
I can imagine.
Well, and also, what came out, I'm married to a teacher and I live in a community of teachers. And one of the biggest pieces for the younger kids at the time, my kids were 7 and 9, was that teachers everyone was wearing masks, obviously, but that the kids couldn't read their lips. Mm-hmm. So they had a really hard time. My son, who really struggles academically, but I remember back then so viscerally, he couldn't understand what the teacher wanted because he couldn't read her lips. And a lot of learning at that age was, I'm watching your lips move, I see what you're saying, but with a mask on, I can't follow what you're saying at that age, and younger especially. A lot of our teachers in the neighborhood said it's so challenging because these kids can't see my face, and that's how they read my emotional state and what I'm trying to express to them. And so it was a real detriment to the kids emotionally. And I see that now, obviously, 3 years later, how it comes out, not just with my kids, but behaviorally. Mm-hmm. I'm a certified coach, and some of the clients that I work with, you were saying it earlier, that some things trickle out that aren't necessarily big deal for them, or so they think, but actually is the root of everything once we get there. And so it's such a beautiful thing when you do get there. But that's nice to know that you all were in it at that time so quickly, because that was a really pivotal, crucial time to have support. It was a crazy time. I'm having flashbacks of you just saying, I'm remembering my kids on Zoom screens all day long with their teachers, but you can't see the other kids. It was wild.
Well, and I remember vividly the screen time, because as a parent, we were so focused on how much time they're on the monitor. But then realizing there's a massive difference between zoning out and just watching a TV show and actually socializing on the computer.
Right.
Where it's the only, I have occurrences where I was trying to get my daughter outside, come on, let's get off the screen. And she's like, look, I'm literally Zooming with 30 friends. That's how I stay connected.
This is my social life.
That's my social life. That's how I stay connected. And there's a lot of value in that. And, the thank God we had it. And, they could see the teachers at least. Imagine if we had to do this before laptops.
No.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly was an upside to it for the COVID period. I think the downside is once the genie, toothpaste is out of the bottle, you can't get it back in, and you can't pull it back. And we know that being on devices is not a great thing for young children, for so many reasons, and not the least of which is it's very hard for parents to monitor everything that goes on. And we did end up with a lot of kids coming through the COVID period who no longer could sit at a table like this together and just have a conversation with each other. They'd be sitting together and texting each other.
Yeah.
And that was a sad outcome. And people have had to work, families have had to work to sort of break that cycle and certainly stop it with the next group coming up, because it was such a necessity with this group because of the pandemic.
That was the younger kids. And then I also coached some high school aged kids who dating became via text.
Yeah.
Oh, well, she broke up with me in a text because that's how they communicate. Why would I talk to someone face to face when I can do it on a phone? And that disconnection from humanity in general was wild to see. And
you've been going steady for 6 months and you've only actually seen each other twice from across a hall somewhere.
Right.
I mean, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what are they doing and what are they doing online. And there have been plenty of times that, a daughter's, she's doing homework. I mean, she's doing work. She's actually studying on her laptop. And then there are times they're zoning out and watching junk on TV. Right. But then there are times that, trying to also find the other side, that my daughters are talking to friends across the country. And, their cousins and all that.
The bright side of it.
There are bright sides, but we have to pay attention to where that's allocated, because, when they're in one small group and they see the same group of people, but she's literally texting with a friend in California, that's a positive.
Right. Well, bringing it back to family centers, you have your work cut out for you. We're just so grateful that you took the time to come here today and share with us everything that you're doing. I will be posting this image because it's powerful to see, and I'll show the camera again, but I'm going to be posting it on our social media pages. It says here, wrapping around the community through all the things that we spoke about: medical, dental, and mental health, educational enhancement, community connections, family supports. It's mind-blowing how many lives you are impacting, and we're so lucky to have family centers right here in Greenwich.
Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. Any last comments, Bob? Anything you want to share that you feel like we've missed?
Well, no, I would just like to encourage viewers to get out and get involved in the community, whether you come and volunteer with family centers or some other community organization. We all really need your help, because we're only going to become the great community that we aspire to be if we all roll our sleeves up and get involved.
I love that. Last question. How old does the child have to be to volunteer?
So, oh my gosh.
I should have asked this earlier when we were talking about it.
Lindsay's got about 80 kids. She's
I know. Like, so many kids I want to send your way. How old? Depends on the program. That makes sense.
I think it's I'm going to say it's around 13, 14 and above if it's going to be working with our children.
That makes sense. I mean, we have 13 and 14-year-olds. So
Can you take them, please? They don't have to talk to anyone.
And they're also givers, our kids, and I would love to see them giving back to the community.
And they're much better and much more mature when they're not with you.
Right, of course. They really are.
Sure.
Well, again, thank you so much, Bob. Thank you,
Bob.
Evelyn, for being here. And we wish you the best with the event this weekend and with everything that Family Centers does throughout the year.
Great. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
All right.